A Mafia here's bride vanished 3 minutes after their wedding vows, not out of fear, but strategy. He didn't chase her. He gave her 72 hours of freedom instead, knowing every second would tighten the invisible chains he'd already wrapped around her throat. What she thought was escape was actually the most dangerous game she'd ever played, and she'd already lost before she took her first step. If you want to see how a woman who refused to kneel becomes the queen no one dares touch, stay until the end. Hit like and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. The chapel smelled like imported lilies and gunpowder residue. Alara Vance stood at the altar in a dress that cost more than most people earned in a year, feeling the weight of 200 eyes on her back like rifle sights. The fabric was custom silk. The lace was handmade in some European country she'd never visit by choice. Everything about this moment was expensive, calculated, and completely suffocating. Adrian Volkov stood beside her, his hand resting against the small of her back. Not gentle, not possessive, just there. A reminder. His tuxedo was perfectly tailored, his expression unreadable, his presence the kind that made grown men lower their voices and check exit routes. He didn't look at her during the ceremony. He didn't need to. The priest spoke in that practiced monotone religious officials used when they knew the people getting married didn't give a damn about sanctity. This wasn't about love. This was a merger. Territory on the east side, shipping routes through the port, an end to 18 months of bloody skirmishes that had left bodies piled in warehouses and allies questioning their loyalties. Alara's father sat in the front row, his face carved from stone, his hands folded too tightly in his lap. He wouldn't meet her eyes. Hadn't since he told her 3 weeks ago that she was getting married, that it was already decided, that she should be grateful Adrian Volkov had agreed to the terms. Grateful. She'd laughed at that. Once, before she realized he was serious. "Do you, Alara Margot Vance, take this man?" She said yes because there were guns in this room, because her younger sister was starting college next month and needed to stay untouched by all of this. Because sometimes survival meant swallowing glass and pretending it didn't cut your throat on the way down. Adrian's hand tightened slightly against her back when she spoke, the only acknowledgement that he'd heard her. When the priest pronounced them married, Adrian turned to her with the kind of precision that made her think of machinery. All function, no warmth. His eyes were pale gray, the color of winter storms over the ocean. He studied her face like he was cataloging details for later use. Then he kissed her. It wasn't brutal. That would have been easier to process, easier to hate. It was controlled, measured, exactly long enough to satisfy tradition and not a second more. His mouth was warm. His hand came up to cup the side of her face, thumb brushing her cheekbone in something that might have looked tender from a distance. Up close, it felt like a claim being staked. When he pulled back, he leaned in close enough that his breath ghosted against her ear. "Don't do anything stupid, Alara." She smiled at him, the kind of smile she'd practiced in mirrors since she was 16 and learning how to survive in rooms full of dangerous men. Of course not. The reception happened in the penthouse, 47 floors above the city, with floor-to-ceiling windows that made the guests look like insects pretending to be important. Chandeliers dripped crystal. Champagne flowed in rivers. A string quartet played something classical and forgettable in the corner. Alara moved through the crowd like she'd been trained for this her entire life, which, in fairness, she had been. Smile at the dawn from the harbor district. Laugh politely at the councilman's joke about politics and matrimony. Accept congratulations from women who looked at her with either pity or envy, sometimes both. Adrian stayed close for the first hour, his hand occasionally finding the small of her back again, steering her toward conversations that mattered and away from ones that didn't. He introduced her to men whose names she recognized from her father's phone calls, from newspaper headlines that never quite told the whole truth. "My wife," he said each time, like he was testing how the word felt in his mouth. She played her part. Gracious, poised, everything a mafia wife should be on the surface. But her eyes tracked the room constantly. Exits, security positions, the rotation pattern of the guards by the elevator. Her mind cataloged details with the same precision Adrian had used when he kissed her. The private elevator required a key card. The stairs would trigger an alarm. The windows didn't open above the 23rd floor, and even if they did, 47 stories was a long way down. But the service entrance in the kitchen, connected to a freight elevator that ran to the underground parking garage. She'd seen it earlier when she'd excused herself to freshen up, which really meant studying the layout of this prison disguised as luxury. Around 10 p.m., Adrian's second-in-command, a man named Victor with scar tissue where his left ear should have been, pulled him aside for a conversation that involved low voices and serious expressions. Adrian's jaw tightened as he listened, his gaze cutting toward the windows like he could see through the city to whatever problem had just surfaced. He turned to her. "I need to handle something. It won't take long." "Of course," she said, touching his arm in what probably looked like wifely concern. "I'll be fine." His eyes narrowed slightly, studying her with that same cataloging intensity from the altar. For a second, she thought he saw right through her. Then Victor said something else, and Adrian's attention shifted. "Don't leave this room," he told her. "I wouldn't dream of it." He left with Victor and 3 other men, disappearing into a private office off the main space. The door closed with a heavy click. Through the frosted glass, she could see shadows moving, animated conversation, the shapes of men arguing about something that probably involved money or blood or both. Alara waited exactly 90 seconds. Then she moved. Not running. Running attracted attention. She walked with purpose, champagne glass still in hand, smiling at a passing couple as she made her way toward the kitchen. The catering staff were busy with dessert service, barely noticing as she slipped past them toward the service corridor. The freight elevator was exactly where she'd seen it. The button glowed when she pressed it. Her heart hammered against her ribs, adrenaline turning everything sharp and immediate. The dress was going to be a problem, too long, too noticeable, but she'd deal with that once she was out of the building. First, she just needed to be gone before Adrian came back and realized his wife had vanished 3 hours into their marriage. The elevator arrived with a soft ding. She stepped inside, pressed the button for the parking garage, and watched the doors slide shut on the party, on Adrian's world, on the life that had been decided for her without her consent. The descent was smooth, quiet. She counted floors in her head, already planning the next moves. The parking garage would have security, but not as tight as upstairs. She'd seen a black sedan earlier with keys visible in the cup holder, sloppy but useful. From there, she could be out of the district in 15 minutes, out of the city in 2 hours. She had cash hidden in her apartment across town, fake documents in a safety deposit box that her father didn't know about, a contact in Boston who owed her a favor big enough that he wouldn't ask questions. 72 hours. That's how long she needed to disappear completely before anyone could mount a real search. 72 hours to become someone Adrian Volkov couldn't find. The elevator opened into the parking garage. Cold concrete and fluorescent lighting, rows of expensive cars sitting like sleeping predators. She stepped out, kicked off her heels, grabbed them in one hand. The concrete was freezing against her bare feet. The sedan was 3 rows over, still unlocked, keys exactly where she'd seen them. She was behind the wheel, engine purring to life, when her phone buzzed in the small clutch she'd somehow remembered to grab. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, then something, instinct, curiosity, the part of her that needed to know, made her accept the call. "Hello, Alara." Adrian's voice was calm. Not angry, not surprised. Just calm. Her blood went cold. "You're wondering how I knew," he continued, like they were discussing the weather. "You're wondering if there was a tracker in your dress, or if someone saw you leave, or if I had cameras in the elevator." She didn't say anything. Couldn't. "The answer is simpler than that," Adrian said. "I know you. I've known you since your father first suggested this arrangement 6 months ago. I've read every file, watched every piece of surveillance footage, studied every decision you've made since you turned 18, and started trying to build an exit strategy from your family's world." The car felt smaller suddenly, like the walls were closing in. "I know you're smart, Alara, disciplined. You think 3 moves ahead, sometimes 4. You wouldn't run without a plan." His voice carried something that might have been respect if it wasn't wrapped in such cold certainty. "So I'm not going to chase you. I'm going to give you 72 hours. "What?" The word came out strangled. 72 hours of freedom. Run wherever you want. Become whoever you need to be. Use every advantage you have. There was a pause. "And when the time's up, I'll come get you. Not my men. Not hired contractors. Me." "Why?" She hated how small her voice sounded. "Because when I bring you back, I want you to understand something very clearly. The calm in his tone cracked slightly, showing something harder underneath. You are mine, Ilara. Not because of some contract or alliance, not because our families decided it, but because I chose you. And what I choose, I keep. The line went dead. She sat there in the stolen car in the parking garage of the building she'd just escaped and realized with perfect horrible clarity that Adrian Volkov had just turned her freedom into another kind of cage. The timer had started. She drove anyway. The apartment in the lower district was exactly as she'd left it. A studio space she'd rented under a fake name 2 years ago, back when she'd first started planning for an exit that might never come. The walls were bare. The furniture was minimal. Everything about it was designed to be abandoned at a moment's notice. She peeled off the wedding dress, left it in a pile on the floor like a shed skin. Pulled on jeans, a dark hoodie, boots meant for running. She found the scissors in the bathroom drawer. Her hair was long, dark, thick, the kind men noticed. The kind Adrian had touched once during the reception, his fingers sliding through it like he was testing its texture. She cut it off in rough, uneven chunks, watching it fall into the sink like pieces of her old identity. When she was done, it barely reached her chin, choppy and graceless. She looked different, harder, like someone who could disappear. The cash was in a waterproof bag taped behind the toilet tank. $47,000 in mixed bills. The passport and driver's license, pristine forgeries with her face and someone else's name, were wrapped in plastic at the bottom. She was back in the car 20 minutes after she'd arrived. Boston was an 8-hour drive. She could make it in 7 if she pushed. Her contact there, Marcus, former associate of her father's who'd gotten out before the violence caught up, ran a shipping business that asked minimal questions about cargo. He could get her on a container ship to Europe, maybe South America. Somewhere Adrian's reach didn't extend quite as far. She made it 60 miles before she saw the first sign. A black SUV, 3 cars back, matching her speed exactly. Her hands tightened on the wheel. She changed lanes. The SUV changed lanes. She took an exit ramp at the last second, tires squealing. The SUV didn't follow. For 5 minutes, she thought she'd lost them. Then her phone buzzed. Another unknown number. This time, a text message. Mile marker 47. We see you. She looked around wildly, seeing nothing but highway and darkness and the distant glow of the city behind her. Another text arrived. Not chasing, just watching. 71 hours left. She threw the phone out the window. Boston fell apart before she even arrived. Marcus didn't answer when she called from a burner phone she'd picked up at a gas station. His business line went to voicemail. The backup number he'd given her, only for emergencies, rang once and disconnected. She sat in a 24-hour diner on the outskirts of the city, coffee going cold in front of her, and understood with sick certainty that Adrian had already been here, had already closed this door before she'd even thought to open it. The waitress refilled her cup without asking. You okay, honey? Fine, Ilara said. Just tired. The TV above the counter played local news, something about traffic. Weather. Then a breaking story. Federal investigation into shipping fraud, several arrests made, assets frozen pending further inquiry. They showed Marcus being led out of his office in handcuffs. The timestamp on the footage was from 6 hours ago, while she'd still been at the wedding reception, playing the role of dutiful bride. Adrian had known, had moved before she did. She left cash on the table and walked out into the cold. She changed her approach after that. Smaller moves, erratic patterns. She ditched the car in a long-term parking lot and took a bus to Providence. From there, she caught a train to New York, then another bus to Philadelphia. She cut her hair again, shorter this time, dyed it a muddy brown in a motel bathroom that smelled like mildew and regret. She bought clothes from thrift stores. Generic, forgettable, nothing that would make anyone look twice. She paid for everything in cash. She avoided cameras when she could, kept her face down when she couldn't. For 3 days, she moved like a ghost, and every single day she saw them. Not the same people, never obvious, but they were there. A man in a coffee shop who made eye contact for a half-second too long, a woman at a train station who turned away too quickly when Ilara looked at her, a car that appeared in 3 different cities with the same dent in the rear bumper. They never approached, never interfered. They just watched. On the 4th day, she was in a library in Baltimore, using a public computer to research bus routes to Atlanta when someone sat down at the terminal next to her. She didn't look at first, kept her eyes on the screen, fingers hovering over the keyboard. "You're very good at this," the person said. Male voice, calm, familiar. She looked. Victor, Adrian's second in command, scar tissue ear and all, sat there like he'd been waiting for her to notice. He wasn't dressed for intimidation, just jeans and a leather jacket, like a regular person using a public computer. "He said not to interfere," Victor continued, pulling up a random web page to maintain the illusion that he was actually here to use the computer. "Said to let you run until the time was up, but I thought you should know something. I'm not interested in anything you have to say. There's a contract on you." That stopped her. "What?" "Dmitry Kovalenko. Runs operations in the North Harbor. He's not happy about the alliance your marriage represents. Thinks if he can remove you from the equation, the whole deal falls apart." Victor's fingers moved across the keyboard, typing nothing. "He put out the contract 20 hours after you left. $500,000 for you alive, $300,000 for proof of death." Her mouth went dry. "You're lying." "I'm really not." He finally looked at her. His expression wasn't cruel, almost sympathetic. "Adrian's network has been keeping them off you. Every move you make, we're there first, clearing the path. You think you've been invisible? You've been protected." "Bullshit. Why do you think Marcus got arrested right before you could reach him? Adrian called in a federal favor, got him picked up on real charges that have been building for years, removed him from play before Kovalenko's people could get to him, torture him for information about where you'd go next." Victor closed the browser window. "You're not running from Adrian, Ilara. You're running inside a perimeter he created to keep you breathing. Then tell him to call off his men. I don't want his protection." "Can't do that. The contract doesn't expire just because you don't like the situation." Victor stood up, pushed his chair in. 72 hours was never about letting you go. It was about letting you see exactly how far you'd get without him. He walked away before she could respond. She sat there, staring at the computer screen, feeling the walls close in from every direction. The 72nd hour arrived while she was in Richmond, holed up in a motel room that rented by the week and didn't ask for ID. She'd spent the last day trying to formulate a new plan. Every option led to a dead end. Every contact she could think of was either compromised, arrested, or too dangerous to approach with a contract on her head. The burner phone she'd bought in Philadelphia, her third one, buzzed at exactly midnight. "Time's up. Stay where you are." She didn't stay. She grabbed the backpack with her remaining cash and fake documents, left through the bathroom window, and made it half a block before the street flooded with headlights. 3 SUVs, moving with coordinated precision, boxing her in from every angle. She ran anyway, back toward the motel, through the narrow alley between buildings, hoping for another exit, another chance. She almost made it to the chain-link fence at the end of the alley. Then a hand caught her arm, spun her around with enough force that she stumbled. Adrian stood there, dressed in dark clothes that made him look like part of the shadows. He wasn't out of breath, wasn't disheveled. He looked exactly like he had at the wedding, controlled, certain, inevitable. "Hello, Ilara," he said quietly. She tried to pull away. His grip tightened, not enough to hurt, just enough to make it clear she wasn't going anywhere. "Let me go." "No. This is kidnapping, illegal detainment. You could what?" His voice remained calm, but something cold moved behind his eyes. "Call the police? File a complaint? You're my wife. Legally, properly married in front of 200 witnesses. And you ran." He stepped closer, backing her against the brick wall. "From their perspective, I'm just a concerned husband retrieving his bride. You gave me 72 hours. I did. And you used them exactly the way I knew you would, running in circles while I mapped every move, every contact, every decision." His free hand came up, fingers catching her chin, forcing her to meet his eyes. "Did you really think I'd give you freedom without purpose? This wasn't mercy, Ilara. It was education." "About what?" "About what happens when you're not under my protection." His thumb brushed her jaw, the gesture almost gentle, if not for the steel in his voice. "Victor told you about the contract. Did you know there were 3 different attempts to grab you? Philadelphia train station, a motel in Baltimore, the coffee shop in Richmond yesterday morning. My men stopped all of them before you even knew you were in danger." Her breath caught. "You're insane. I'm realistic." He released her chin but didn't step back. Your father made powerful enemies when he agreed to this alliance. Some of those enemies see you as leverage. Others see you as a loose end. Either way, you're valuable, and value makes you a target. So what, I'm supposed to thank you? Be grateful for the cage? I don't need your gratitude. Adrian's expression didn't change. I need you alive. And whether you accept it or not, the safest place for you to be is exactly where I can see you. A car pulled up at the mouth of the alley, one of the SUVs, back door already open. We're leaving, Adrian said. It wasn't a question. She wanted to fight, wanted to scream, run, do anything except get in that car and admit defeat. But Victor's words echoed in her head. You've been protected. And she understood with bitter clarity that every illusion of freedom she'd had over the past 72 hours had been exactly that. An illusion. She got in the car. Adrian slid in beside her, closed the door. The driver pulled away from the curb without a word. They sat in silence for 10 minutes before Alara finally spoke. What happens now? Now? Adrian glanced at her, his face half-shadowed in the passing streetlights. Now you learn how to survive in the world you married into. Because like it or not, Alara, you're not just my wife anymore. His voice dropped lower, carrying weight that made her skin prickle. You're a target, and targets don't get to run. The penthouse looked exactly the same as it had 3 days ago. Crystal chandeliers, floor-to-ceiling windows, imported furniture that cost more than most people's houses. But walking back through those doors felt different this time, like entering a tomb that happened to have good lighting. Adrian's hand remained on her lower back as they crossed the threshold, a constant reminder of ownership. His men dispersed without being told, melting into hallways and rooms with the efficiency of people who knew their positions without needing instructions. Your things are in the master bedroom, Adrian said, finally releasing her. Second door on the left. Alara looked at him. My things? From your apartment. The one in the lower district you thought I didn't know about. He loosened his tie with one hand, the gesture casual. I had it cleared out while you were running. Everything's been moved here. Of course he'd known. Of course he'd already dismantled that piece of her life while she'd been busy thinking she was being clever. You had no right. I have every right. You're my wife. Adrian's tone didn't rise, didn't sharpen. He stated it like a fact of physics. And wives live with their husbands, especially when there are people actively trying to kill them. She wanted to throw something at his head. Wanted to scream that marriage certificates didn't equal ownership, that she was a person, not property, that he couldn't just erase her autonomy because it was convenient. But she was exhausted, bone-deep, soul-tired, exhausted, in a way that made her legs feel like they might give out. I need to sleep, she said instead. Then sleep. He gestured toward the hallway. The room's yours. Door locks from the inside if it makes you feel better. It wouldn't. They both knew that. But she walked down the hallway anyway, found the second door on the left, and stepped into a bedroom that was bigger than her entire studio apartment had been. Her clothes hung in the closet, not just the things from her secret apartment, but clothes from her father's house, items she hadn't seen since before the wedding. Someone had unpacked everything, organized it by color and type, like she was meant to stay here forever. She locked the door anyway. Then she sat on the edge of the bed, a massive thing with silk sheets and too many pillows, and let herself feel the full weight of how thoroughly trapped she was. Sleep came in fragments, broken by dreams of running through hallways that stretched forever, of hands reaching from shadows, of Adrian's voice calm and certain, saying you are mine over and over until it sounded like a heartbeat. When she woke, gray morning light filtered through gauzy curtains she didn't remember closing. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Then memory crashed back with physical force. She was in Adrian's penthouse, Adrian's bedroom, Adrian's world, and she had no idea how to get out. She showered in the attached bathroom, marble and chrome and a rainfall showerhead that probably cost what some people paid in monthly rent. The water pressure was perfect. She hated that she noticed. When she emerged, there were clothes laid out on the bed. Not the ones she'd have chosen, dark jeans and an old sweater, but tailored pants and a silk blouse in deep emerald. Expensive, tasteful, the kind of thing a Mafia wife would wear. She put them on because her other option was wandering around in a towel. The penthouse was quieter than she'd expected when she finally left the bedroom. No guards visible in the immediate hallways, though she had no doubt they were close. The main living area was empty, floor-to-ceiling windows showing the city spread out below like a game board. She found Adrian in what appeared to be an office, dark wood furniture, bookshelves that actually had books, a desk with 3 monitors showing various security feeds. He was on the phone, speaking in rapid Russian to someone who seemed to be disagreeing with him based on Adrian's expression. He saw her in the doorway and held up one finger. "Wait." She leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, and waited. Mom, arms piants. The conversation ended with Adrian saying something sharp and final before disconnecting. He set the phone down, rubbed his eyes with one hand like he was fighting off a headache. "Sleep well?" he asked. "No. Honest. I appreciate that." He gestured to one of the chairs facing his desk. "Sit. We need to talk." "I'm fine standing." "Alara." Not quite in order, but close. "Sit." She sat, mostly because her legs were still tired and the chair looked comfortable, not because he'd told her to. That's what she told herself anyway. Adrian leaned back in his own chair, studying her with that same cataloging intensity from the wedding. "The contract on you is still active. Dmitry Kovalenko hasn't pulled it, and he won't unless I give him something he wants more than he wants to destabilize our alliance." "What does he want?" "Territory. Specifically, shipping routes through the eastern harbor that my family controls." Adrian's fingers drummed once against the armrest. "He thinks your death or disappearance would force your father to break the alliance, which would leave those routes vulnerable. He's wrong, but that doesn't make him less dangerous." "So what? I just hide here forever?" "No. You learn how to survive." He leaned forward. "You're not stupid, Alara. You proved that over the last 72 hours. But you're also not trained for the kind of threats you're facing now. That changes starting today." She blinked. "What are you talking about?" "Victor will teach you hand-to-hand combat, basic defensive tactics, how to identify a threat before it gets close." Adrian pulled up something on one of his monitors, angled it toward her. "Katya, my head of security, will teach you weapons, handguns, knives, improvised tools, and I'll teach you how to read people, how to navigate conversations where a wrong word can get you killed." Alara stared at the screen. It showed a training schedule, blocked out in meticulous detail. Early morning combat sessions, afternoon weapons training, evening tactical briefings. "You're serious?" "Completely." Adrian's expression didn't waver. "You married into a world where weakness gets exploited and ignorance gets you killed. I can protect you. I will protect you. But I can't be everywhere at once, so you're going to learn how to protect yourself. And if I refuse, then you stay locked in this penthouse under 24-hour guard until Dimitri's contract expires or someone puts a bullet in his head to end the problem." Adrian's voice stayed level. "Your choice. Prison or preparation. Which sounds better?" She wanted to hate him for framing it that way, for making it sound like he was doing her a favor instead of controlling every aspect of her existence. But the rational part of her brain, the part that had kept her alive through 3 days of running, recognized the truth in what he was saying. Victor had been right. She'd been protected during her escape, insulated from threats she hadn't even known existed. And if those threats were real, if people really were trying to grab or kill her, then maybe learning to fight back wasn't the worst option. "Fine," she said. "I'll train." "Good." Adrian stood, buttoned his suit jacket. "Victor's waiting in the gym. 2 floors down, east wing. Don't be late." She stood as well, turned to leave, then paused at the door. "Why are you doing this?" "Doing what?" "Training me, protecting me. You could have just kept me locked up, completely dependent on your men." She looked back at him. "Why give me any kind of power?" Adrian was quiet for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then he said, "Because I don't want a prisoner, Ilara. I want a partner, and partners need to be able to stand on their own feet." He said it so simply, like it was obvious, like it wasn't the most confusing thing she'd heard since this nightmare started. She left before she could think too hard about what it meant. The gym was exactly where Adrian said it would be. A massive space with rubber flooring, weight equipment along one wall, and a boxing ring in the center that looked like it had seen actual use. Victor stood near a rack of practice weapons, wearing athletic clothes that made the scar tissue on his neck more visible. "You came," he said when she entered. "Good. I thought you might try to run again." "Where would I go?" "Smart girl." He tossed her a pair of practice gloves. "Get changed. Locker room's through that door. We start in 5 minutes. The locker room had clothes in her size waiting, athletic pants, a fitted tank top, training shoes that actually fit properly. Someone had planned this down to the detail. When she returned, Victor was stretching in the center of the mat. He looked up as she approached. "You ever fight before?" "Does slapping my cousin at Thanksgiving count?" He almost smiled. "Not really." "Okay, basics first. Show me your stance." She tried to remember movies she'd seen, action sequences that probably had no basis in reality. Planted her feet, raised her fists. Victor walked around her, adjusting her position with clinical efficiency. Feet wider, weight forward, elbows in. You're not trying to look tough. You're trying to stay balanced. He tapped her forward knee. Someone pushes you right now. You fall over. That's death in a real fight. Comforting? Truth usually is. He stepped back, assumed his own stance. "I'm going to come at you slow. I want you to block. Don't think about hitting back yet. Just protect your center." He moved forward, threw a lazy punch toward her midsection. She tried to block, failed. His fist stopped an inch from her ribs. "Again," Victor said. They did it again, and again, and again. By the time an hour had passed, Alara's arms ached, her legs felt like jelly, and she'd successfully blocked maybe 3 out of every 10 strikes Victor threw at her. "Better," he said, though his tone suggested he was being generous. "You're thinking too much. Combat's not a chess game. You can't calculate every move." "Then what is it?" "Survival." He grabbed 2 water bottles from the bench, tossed her one. "You react or you die. That's the whole equation." She drank half the bottle in one go, her throat burning. "How long did it take you to learn this?" "Years, but you don't have years." Victor's expression was serious. "You've got maybe weeks before Dimitri or someone else makes a real move. So we're going to compress your education, teach you enough to survive the first 30 seconds of an attack. After that, Adrian's men should be able to reach you." "Should?" "Nothing's guaranteed, but 30 seconds is better than nothing." They trained for another hour. By the end, Alara could barely lift her arms. Her muscles screamed. Sweat soaked through her shirt. Victor looked completely unfazed. "Tomorrow, same time. We'll work on escapes." "Can't wait," she muttered. She stumbled back to the master bedroom, every step an exercise in stubbornness. The shower felt like a religious experience. She stood under the hot water until her skin turned pink and her muscles loosened enough that she could move without whimpering. When she emerged, Adrian was sitting in the chair by the window, reading something on his phone. She froze, suddenly very aware that she was wrapped in a towel and nothing else. He glanced up. "Victor says you didn't quit." "Should I have?" "Most people would." He pocketed his phone, stood. "Dinner's in 20 minutes. We're eating together." "Is that an order?" "It's an expectation." He moved toward the door, then paused. "And Alara? You did well today. Better than I thought you would." He left before she could decide if that was a compliment or an insult. Dinner happened in a formal dining room she hadn't seen before. Long table, actual china, the kind of setup that belonged in period dramas about rich people with too much time. Adrian sat at the head of the table. She sat to his right, close enough to talk without shouting, far enough that it didn't feel intimate. The food was prepared by someone who clearly knew what they were doing, some kind of chicken with herbs she couldn't identify, roasted vegetables, bread that was still warm. She ate because her body demanded fuel, not because she was enjoying the experience. "Tell me about your sister," Adrian said halfway through the meal. Alara's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. "Why?" "Because I want to know." He cut his chicken with precise movements. "You mentioned her once, college-aged. You said you did this partly to keep her safe." "Her name's Maya. She's 19, starting sophomore year at a university 6 states away from here." Alara set her fork down. "And if you're thinking about using her as leverage..." "I'm not." Adrian's voice was flat. "I'm asking because part of protecting you means understanding what you care about. Your sister's a vulnerability. I need to know that. She's not involved in any of this. Neither were you, technically. Didn't stop you from getting a contract put on your head." He took a drink of wine. "I'll have someone keep an eye on her, discreetly, just to make sure Dimitri doesn't get creative." Alara's hands clenched in her lap. "I don't want your people anywhere near her." "Too bad." Adrian's tone didn't change. "She's family now, whether she knows it or not. That means she's under my protection, same as you. Non-negotiable." They ate in silence for a while. Alara's mind spun with thoughts of Maya, oblivious, safe, living a normal college life, completely unaware that her sister had been dragged into a world where people killed each other over shipping routes. She wants to be a teacher, Alara said quietly. Elementary school. She's good with kids. Patient in a way I never was. You're close? Used to be. Before I started pulling away. She pushed food around her plate. I didn't want her to see too much of our father's world. Thought if I kept her at a distance, she'd stay clean. Did it work? Yeah, she thinks Dad's a businessman with some rough associates. Has no idea how deep it actually goes. Alara met Adrian's eyes. I'd like to keep it that way. Then she'll be protected quietly. No contact, no interference, just surveillance to make sure no one gets ideas. Adrian finished his wine. Anything else I should know about? Other family, close friends, people you'd die to protect? The way he phrased it made her chest tighten. Why does it sound like you're making a list of targets? Because I'm making a list of potential vulnerabilities that need to be covered. He leaned back in his chair. This is how you survive, Alara. You identify what can be used against you, and you protect it before someone else can weaponize it. That's a miserable way to live. It's the only way to live in our world. Adrian stood, collected his plate. Get some rest. Katya will be here at noon tomorrow for weapons training. He left her sitting there, surrounded by expensive china and the crushing weight of a life she hadn't chosen but couldn't escape. The next 2 weeks followed a brutal routine. Morning combat training with Victor that left her bruised and aching. Midday weapons sessions with Katya, a woman in her 40s with ice blonde hair and the kind of focus that made Alara think of surgical instruments. Evenings with Adrian, learning how to read microexpressions, how to navigate conversations filled with hidden threats, how to smile at people who'd kill her without hesitation if it served their interests. She fell into bed exhausted every night and woke up sore every morning. But she also got better. By the end of week 2, she could block most of Victor's strikes, could execute basic escapes from holds and grabs. She could field strip and reassemble a handgun in under a minute, could hit center mass on a target from 20 feet. She could sit through dinner with Adrian's associates, cold-eyed men who looked at her like they were calculating her value, and maintain perfect composure. She was learning to survive. On the 15th day, Adrian took her to a meeting. Why? She asked when he told her to get dressed for it. Because you need to be seen, need to be recognized as mine. He adjusted his cufflinks. And because I want to see how you handle yourself in a room full of predators. The meeting happened in a warehouse on the waterfront, neutral territory apparently, where different factions could gather without worrying about territorial violations. Adrian's men drove them there in an armored car that looked normal from the outside, but had reinforced panels and bulletproof glass hidden beneath the paint. Inside, the warehouse was set up like a conference room that happened to smell like rust and ocean salt. A long table, chairs, men in expensive suits that didn't quite hide the guns they carried. Dmitry Kovalenko sat at the far end. Alara recognized him from photos Victor had shown her during tactical briefings. Late 50s, gray hair slicked back, a face that would have been handsome if not for the cruelty in his eyes. He looked up when Adrian entered, his gaze sliding immediately to Alara. So this is the bride, Dmitry said in accented English. The one who ran. The one who came back, Adrian corrected, his hand firm on Alara's lower back as they took seats across from Dmitry's contingent. The meeting itself was about territories and shipments, percentages, and schedules. Alara understood maybe half of it, but she watched faces, cataloged reactions, remembered what Adrian had taught her about reading people. Dmitry kept looking at her, not lustfully, more like she was a puzzle he was trying to solve. Halfway through, during a pause in negotiations, he addressed her directly. Tell me, Mrs. Volkov, do you enjoy your new life? The room went quiet. Adrian's hand tightened fractionally against her back. A warning or reassurance, she couldn't tell. Alara smiled the way Katya had taught her, pleasant, empty, revealing nothing. I'm adjusting. Adjusting? Dmitry leaned back in his chair. Interesting choice of words. Most women would say they're happy or grateful or some other pretty lie. I prefer honesty to pretty lies. Dangerous preference in our world. Maybe. She held his gaze. But I found that pretty lies get you killed just as quickly. At least honesty lets you see the knife coming. Something shifted in Dmitry's expression. Not quite respect, but close. He smiled, thin and cold. Your wife has teeth, Adrian. Unexpected. She's full of surprises, Adrian said evenly. The meeting continued. Alara stayed quiet for the rest of it, playing the role of decorative spouse who'd had her moment of interesting commentary. But she felt the weight of Dimitri's attention like a physical thing, heavy and assessing. When they finally left, Adrian waited until they were in the car before speaking. That was reckless. You brought me here to be seen. I was seen. I brought you here to observe, not to engage with the man who put a contract on your head. He spoke to me directly. What was I supposed to do? Ignore him? Alara turned to look at Adrian. You said I needed to learn how to handle myself in rooms full of predators, so I did. Adrian stared at her for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, he laughed, short and sharp. Fair enough. Did I mess something up? No, actually, you probably helped. He loosened his tie. Dimitri respects strength. You showed him you're not some terrified girl I'm keeping locked up. That makes you less interesting as a target. So the contract, still active, but he's thinking now, reassessing. Adrian's expression went serious. Don't mistake this for safety, Alara. You're still in danger, but you bought yourself some consideration. That's worth something. They rode the rest of the way in silence. That night, Alara couldn't sleep. She lay in the too-big bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the meeting over and over. Dimitri's cold eyes, the weight of violence barely contained in that warehouse. The way Adrian had positioned himself between her and every potential threat without making it obvious. She got up around 2 a.m., pulled on a robe, and wandered out into the main living area. Adrian was there, standing by the windows with a glass of something amber in his hand, looking out at the city. He didn't turn when she approached. Can't sleep? Too much in my head. Common problem in this life. He took a drink. You get used to it. She stood next to him, looking out at the light spread below. From this height, the city looked almost peaceful, clean, like all the violence and ugliness happened somewhere else. Did you mean it? She asked quietly. Mean what? When you said you wanted a partner, not a prisoner. Adrian was quiet for a moment. Yes. Then why does it still feel like a cage? Because it is a cage. He finally looked at her. But so is the alternative. You think if you'd successfully escaped, if you'd made it to Europe or South America or wherever you were planning to run, that you'd be free. You'd be looking over your shoulder for the rest of your life. Dimitri's contract would follow you. Your father's enemies would eventually find you. You'd be alone, vulnerable, and hunted. At least I'd be alone by choice. Would you? His voice was soft, almost sad. Or would you be isolated because trust is a luxury you can't afford? Because every person you meet could be a threat? That's not freedom, Alara. That's just a different kind of prison. She didn't have an answer for that. They stood there in silence, watching the city breathe below them. I don't love you, she said eventually. I don't even like you most of the time. I know, but I'm starting to understand why you do the things you do, and I hate that. Adrian's mouth curved slightly. Not quite a smile. That's progress, I suppose. Is it? It's honest. That's more than most people in our world manage. He finished his drink, set the glass down. Go back to bed, Alara. Tomorrow, Victor's going to teach you how to use a knife in close quarters. You'll need rest. She left him there, silhouetted against the city lights, and returned to the bedroom that was starting to feel less like foreign territory and more like inevitable fate. The knife training started exactly as Adrian had promised, brutal, immediate, and terrifying in ways Alara hadn't anticipated. Victor handed her a practice blade, dull edge, weighted like the real thing, and demonstrated the grip. Most people think knife fighting is like the movies, lots of slashing, dramatic poses, clean cuts. He shook his head. Real knife work is ugly, close, desperate. You're trying to create enough damage that your attacker stops coming. That's it. Encouraging, Alara muttered, adjusting her grip the way he'd shown her. Truth is more useful than encouragement. Victor moved into position across from her. I'm going to come at you like someone who wants you dead. Your job is to make me regret it. Ready? She wasn't, but she nodded anyway. Victor moved fast, faster than she'd seen him move in their previous sessions. He was on her before she could process, his practice blade angling toward her ribs. She blocked on instinct, felt the jarring impact up her arm, tried to remember the counterstrike Katya had taught her last week. She got the blade up, aimed for Victor's exposed side. Too slow. He batted her hand away, swept her legs, and she hit the mat hard enough to knock the air from her lungs. Dead, Victor said flatly. Again. They ran it again, and again, and again. By the time the session ended 2 hours later, Elara had bruises forming on her ribs, her wrists, her shins. She'd died approximately 37 times by her count. She'd successfully landed exactly 3 strikes that Victor deemed adequate enough to maybe slow someone down. You're thinking too much, Victor said as she sat on the mat, breathing hard. Your brain's trying to calculate angles and timing, but in a real fight, there's no time for calculation. You see an opening, you take it, you feel resistance, you push through. Everything else is just noise. Easy for you to say. It's easy because I've done it hundreds of times. You've done it for 2 hours. He offered her a hand up. Give yourself credit. Most people would have quit after the first 10 minutes. Most people aren't married to Adrian Volkov. Victor's expression flickered, something that might have been sympathy. No, they're not. She showered away the sweat and the ache, then spent the afternoon with Katya working on target acquisition drills. Katya was less patient than Victor, more demanding. When Elara's grouping spread too wide on the target, Katya didn't offer gentle correction. She just reloaded the weapon and said, again, and this time pretend someone you love is standing behind that target, and missing means they die. It was manipulative as hell. It also worked. Elara's next grouping was tight enough that Katya gave a small nod of approval. Better. Your emotional control is improving. Katya checked the chamber and gauged the safety. But you're still hesitating before you pull the trigger. That hesitation will get you killed. I've never shot anyone before. I know. But the first time you need to, you won't have the luxury of working through your feelings about it. Katya's eyes were cold, assessing. You'll have maybe 2 seconds to decide if you want to live or die. That decision needs to be automatic. Elara set the gun down on the bench. How did you make it automatic? Practice. And necessity. Katya began breaking down the weapon for cleaning. The first time I killed someone, I threw up immediately after. Shook so badly I couldn't hold a cup of water. But I was alive, and the man who tried to rape me was dead. After that, the choice got easier. The casual way she said it made Elara's stomach turn. I'm sorry that happened to you. Don't be. I'm not. Katya's hands moved with mechanical precision, cleaning each component. That experience taught me the most important lesson anyone in our world can learn. Your life is worth more than your comfort. Act accordingly. The words stayed with Elara through the rest of the day. Through dinner with Adrian, where they discussed upcoming meetings and potential threats in tones that made violence sound like logistics. Through another sleepless night where she lay awake wondering how many lines she'd already crossed and how many more she'd cross before this was over. 3 days later, everything went to hell. It started with a phone call that came through while Elara was in the gym, working through a solo training routine Victor had assigned. One of Adrian's men appeared in the doorway, Mikhail, a quiet guy with a permanent scowl who usually handled perimeter security. Boss wants you upstairs, now. The tone made her pulse spike. What's wrong? Just go. She went, still in her training clothes, sweat cooling uncomfortably against her skin. The penthouse felt different when she entered. Tension thick enough to choke on, Adrian's men positioned at strategic points like they were expecting an attack. Adrian was in his office, standing at the window with his phone pressed to his ear and murder in his eyes. He saw her enter, held up one finger, then said something in Russian that sounded extremely final before disconnecting. What happened? Elara asked. Your sister. Adrian's voice was flat, controlled in a way that meant he was barely holding back rage. Someone tried to grab her off campus 2 hours ago. The world tilted. What? 2 men, pretending to be campus security. Told her there'd been a threat called in. They needed to move her to a safe location. Adrian pulled up security footage on one of his monitors, turned it toward her. She didn't go with them. Smart girl. Ran toward a group of students instead, made enough noise that the men backed off. The footage showed Maya, smaller than Elara remembered, wearing a university sweatshirt, being approached by 2 men in generic security uniforms. Showed her stepping back, shaking her head, then bolting toward a cluster of people near a campus building. Elara's legs gave out. She sat down hard in the nearest chair. Is she okay? She's fine. Scared, confused, but fine. Campus police took her statement. They think it was an attempted assault. Adrian's jaw tightened. They're wrong. This was Dimitri. You said you had people watching her. I did. I do. Adrian pulled up another screen, this one showing text communications. My man reported the incident 30 seconds after it happened. He was about to intervene when your sister ran. The men backed off immediately. Professionals, not opportunists. They didn't want witnesses. Alara's hands shook. What do we do? We move her. Adrian was already typing something. I'm pulling her out of that university, relocating her somewhere I control completely. Security detail, new identity if necessary. She'll never agree to that. She doesn't even know. Then she learns. Adrian's tone left no room for argument. She learns enough to understand why her life just changed, or she stays ignorant and vulnerable. Your choice. It wasn't really a choice. They both knew that. I need to talk to her, Alara said. Not over the phone. In person. Too dangerous. I don't care. She stood, met his eyes. If you're going to upend her entire life, she deserves to hear it from me. Not from strangers telling her she's being relocated for mysterious safety reasons. Adrian studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded. Fine. We leave in an hour. You'll have 30 minutes with her. Supervised location, full security detail, non-negotiable terms. Agreed. The university was 6 states away, but Adrian had access to a private plane that made the trip feel surreal. Leather seats. No security lines, just walking onto a tarmac and being airborne 20 minutes later. Alara sat across from Adrian during the flight, her mind spinning with how to explain any of this to Maya. Hey, remember how I got married suddenly? Turns out I married into the Mafia. Someone put a hit out on me, and now they're trying to use you as leverage. Surprise. Yeah, that would go great. Adrian worked during the flight, typing on his laptop, making calls in 3 different languages, but he glanced at her once and said, She'll understand more than you think. People adapt when they have to. She's 19. You were 23 when you married me. Age doesn't determine capacity for survival. He went back to his screen. Give her some credit. They landed at a private airfield near the university. 3 cars were waiting, Adrian's men already in position. The plan was simple. Maya would be told her sister was in town unexpectedly and wanted to see her. They'd meet at a coffee shop near campus that Adrian's people had already secured, empty except for staff who'd been paid extremely well to close for a private event. Maya arrived looking exactly like Alara remembered. Dark hair in a messy bun, oversized cardigan, the kind of easy confidence that came from not knowing how bad the world could be. She saw Alara through the coffee shop window and smiled, waving as she pushed through the door. Then she saw Adrian standing behind Alara, saw the men positioned at strategic points around the room, and her smile died. Alara? What's going on? Sit down, Maya, please. You're scaring me. I know. I'm sorry. Just sit. Maya sat slowly, her eyes darting between Alara and Adrian like she was trying to solve a puzzle with missing pieces. Is this about what happened earlier? The weird security guys? Yes. Alara reached across the table, took her sister's hand. Those men weren't random. They were sent specifically to grab you, to use you as leverage against me. Leverage for what? For my marriage. Alara took a breath. Adrian's family isn't just wealthy, Maya. They're involved in things that are complicated and dangerous. My marriage to him created alliances that some people don't like. Those people are trying to destabilize things by targeting me. And now, by extension, you. Maya pulled her hand back. You're telling me you married into organized crime? Yes. And you didn't think to mention this? I couldn't. It's not... Alara stopped, tried again. I kept you separate from all of this intentionally. I wanted you to have a normal life, but after today, that's not possible anymore. Maya looked at Adrian. And you're what exactly? Her handler? Her husband, Adrian said evenly. And now, your brother-in-law. Which means your family. Which means you're under my protection whether you want to be or not. I don't need protection from some... Yes, you do. Adrian's tone didn't rise, but something in it made Maya stop talking. 2 men tried to abduct you this afternoon. They would have succeeded if you hadn't run. Next time, they won't give you the chance to run. They'll use chloroform or a taser or just put a gun to your head and force you into a vehicle. And then they'll use you to manipulate your sister into doing things that will get her killed. Maya's face had gone pale. This is insane. This is reality. Adrian leaned forward slightly. I can keep you safe. I have resources, personnel, locations that are secure. But you have to cooperate. That means leaving this university, relocating to somewhere I control, accepting a security detail, and following protocols that will feel restrictive and invasive and completely unreasonable. Or, Maya's voice was small, or you stay here and we all wait for the next attempt, which will come, maybe tomorrow, maybe next week, but it will come. Silence filled the coffee shop. Through the windows, Alara could see Adrian's men maintaining their positions. The street outside cordoned off in ways most people wouldn't notice. Maya looked at Alara. You really married into this? I didn't have a choice. Everyone has a choice. No. Alara's voice came out harder than she intended. They really don't. Not when the alternative is watching everyone you love become collateral damage in someone else's war. Maya's eyes filled with tears. She blinked them back angrily. I hate this. I know. I hate that you didn't tell me. I know. I hate that my life is being decided by people I don't know for reasons I don't understand. I know, Maya. I'm so sorry. Maya scrubbed at her eyes with the sleeve of her cardigan. Where would I go? Adrian pulled out a tablet, showed her photos. I have a property upstate. Isolated, secure, but comfortable. You'd have your own space, internet access, ability to continue your studies remotely. The security team would be present but unobtrusive. You could still have a life, just a different one. For how long? Until the threat is neutralized. Adrian's expression was unreadable. Could be weeks, could be months. I can't give you a timeline. Maya looked at the photos, then at Alara, then back at the tablet. Do I actually have a choice here? Technically, yes, Adrian said. Realistically, no. The contract on your sister extends to her immediate family by implication. That makes you a target. I'm offering you safety. The alternative is hoping you get lucky. That's not really a choice. No, it's not. Maya was quiet for a long time. Then she said, Can I at least say goodbye to my friends? Supervised goodbyes in a controlled location. They'll be told you're transferring universities for personal reasons. Adrian's tone was firm. No social media posts, no location sharing, no hints about where you're actually going. So I just disappear. You survive, Alara corrected. There's a difference. Maya looked at her sister with something that might have been anger or might have been grief. Is this what your life is like now? Making impossible choices and pretending they're reasonable? Every single day. That's horrible. Yes, Alara managed a weak smile. But I'm still alive, and so are you. That's worth something. Maya started crying then, silent tears that tracked down her face while she stared at the tablet showing photos of a life she didn't choose. Alara moved around the table, pulled her sister into a hug that felt like goodbye even though it wasn't supposed to be. I'm so sorry, Alara whispered. I never wanted this for you. I know. Maya's voice was muffled against Alara's shoulder. I know you didn't. Adrian gave them 5 more minutes, then quietly indicated it was time to leave. Maya was moved to a secure vehicle with 2 of Adrian's most trusted people, a woman named Irina, who had a kind face, and a man named Alexei, who looked like he could fight off a small army single-handedly. Alara watched the car drive away, carrying her sister toward a life of protection and isolation, and felt something crack in her chest. She'll be okay, Adrian said beside her. You don't know that. I do. She's your sister. She's tougher than she looks. He gestured toward their own vehicle. We need to leave. Staying in one place too long is asking for trouble. The flight back was silent. Alara stared out the window at clouds that looked like nothing, her mind replaying Maya's tear-streaked face over and over. This is my fault, she said eventually. Adrian looked up from his laptop. No, it's not. I ran. After the wedding. If I just stayed, then you'd have been miserable, resentful, and completely unprepared when the threats came anyway. Adrian closed the laptop. You running forced me to show you how dangerous your situation was. It gave you motivation to train, to learn, to become someone who could survive in this world. If you'd stayed compliant and ignorant, you'd be exactly what Dmitri thinks you are, a weakness he could exploit. My sister's life is upside down because of me. Your sister's life is upside down because Dmitry Kovalenko is a bastard who uses civilians as chess pieces. Adrian's voice was harder now. Don't take ownership of his choices, Alara. You didn't create this situation. You're just dealing with it as best you can. She wanted to believe that, wanted to shift the blame away from herself and onto the faceless enemies playing games with other people's lives. But the guilt sat heavy in her chest anyway, refusing to move. When they arrived back at the penthouse, Alara went straight to the bedroom and locked the door. She sat on the edge of the bed, still in her traveling clothes, and let herself feel the full weight of everything that had happened. Maya was gone. Relocated, protected, but gone. The sister who used to sneak into Alara's room at night when they were kids, who'd asked for help with homework and boy troubles and college essays, who'd looked at Alara like she had all the answers. That sister was living in a secure facility upstate, surrounded by armed guards, because Alara had married a man she didn't love to save a family that was broken beyond repair. The knock on the door came around midnight. Alara, Adrian's voice, calm through the wood. Let me in. Go away. No. A pause. You've been in there for 6 hours. You need to eat something. I'm not hungry. Don't care. Open the door. She almost didn't. Almost told him to leave her alone, to let her drown in guilt and peace. But the rational part of her brain, the part that was learning to survive in this world, recognized that starving herself wouldn't help Maya, wouldn't fix anything, would just make her weak and useless. She opened the door. Adrian stood there with a tray. Simple food, nothing fancy. Soup, bread, water. He walked past her, set it on the bedside table. Eat, he said. Stop ordering me around. Eat, please. His tone didn't change much, but the addition of the word felt significant. She sat down, picked up the spoon, ate because he was right, and she hated that he was right. Adrian sat in the chair by the window, watching her in that way he had, cataloging, assessing, seeing too much. She'll hate me, Alara said after a while. Maybe. For a little while. Adrian was quiet for a moment. But she'll be alive to hate you. That's the trade. Some trade. It's the only one available. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. You want to know what I think? Not particularly. I think you're stronger than you give yourself credit for. You've been in this world for less than a month, and you've learned to fight, to shoot, to read people, to navigate situations that would break most civilians. You protected your sister by making an impossible choice. That's not weakness, Alara. That's survival. I don't feel strong. I feel like I'm drowning. Everyone feels like that at first. Adrian's voice was softer now. But you're still breathing, still thinking, still fighting. That counts for something. She finished the soup because her body needed fuel, not because she enjoyed it. Set the bowl down, looked at Adrian across the space between them. Do you ever regret this? She asked. The marriage? The alliance? All of it? No. Why not? Because regret is useless. I made a choice based on the information I had and the goals I wanted to achieve. Whether it was the right choice remains to be seen, but regretting it now doesn't change anything. He stood. Get some sleep. Tomorrow we start planning our response to Dmitri's move against your sister. What kind of response? The kind that makes him understand he crossed a line. Adrian's expression went cold. He touched your family. That requires an answer. He left before she could ask what kind of answer he was planning. The next morning, Alara woke to find the penthouse transformed into something resembling a war room. Adrian's men filled the main living area. Some she recognized, others she didn't. Maps covered the dining table. Laptops displayed surveillance feeds and data she couldn't parse. Victor stood near the windows, talking in low tones with Katya. Adrian was at the center of it all, orchestrating movement and plans with the precision of someone who'd done this before. What's happening? Alara asked. Victor answered before Adrian could. We're hitting Dmitri's operations. 3 locations simultaneously. Send a message that he can't touch your family without consequences. Isn't that going to start a war? It's going to prevent one, Adrian corrected, looking up from the table. Dmitri thinks he can push boundaries without repercussions. We're going to prove him wrong, decisively. People are going to get hurt. Yes, Dimitri's people. Adrian's tone was flat. That's the point. Elara felt the room shift around her, casual conversations about violence, tactical discussions about how to inflict maximum damage with minimal risk. This was the world she'd married into, stripped of all pretense and polish. I want to help, she heard herself say. Everyone stopped talking. Adrian looked at her. No. You said I needed to learn to survive, that I needed to be a partner, not a prisoner. She crossed her arms. So let me be a partner. What can I do? You can stay here, where it's safe, and let the professionals handle this. That's not being a partner, that's being protected cargo. She held his gaze. I understand I'm not ready for field work, but there has to be something useful I can do. Intelligence, analysis, something. Adrian studied her for a long moment. Then he gestured to Katya. Show her the surveillance files on Dimitri's lieutenant. See if she notices anything useful. Katya raised an eyebrow but pulled up a laptop, motioned Elara over. These are intercepts from the last 72 hours. Communications, movement patterns, meeting locations. Look for inconsistencies, patterns, anything that seems off. Elara sat down, started reading. 3 hours later, she found something. Here, she said, pointing at the screen. This meeting location. It's listed as a restaurant on 5th, but the timestamp shows it happened at 2 a.m. Restaurants aren't open at 2 a.m. Katya leaned over, examined the data. Could be a typo. Or it could be a front. Elara pulled up another file. This same location appears 3 times in the last month, always late night, always with the same personnel. That's not a coincidence. Katya looked impressed despite herself. Good catch. She pulled Adrian over, showed him the finding. Adrian studied it, his expression unreadable, then nodded. Run a property search on that address. Find out who owns it, what the actual business is. He looked at Elara. Good work. It was a small thing, finding one inconsistency in a mountain of data, but it felt significant, like she was contributing instead of just being protected. Like she was becoming part of this world instead of just being dragged through it. The operation launched that night. Adrian didn't give her details, just said he'd be gone for several hours and that she should stay in the penthouse under guard. Victor and half the team went with him. The other half stayed behind, positioned throughout the building in defensive configurations. Elara tried to distract herself with training, with reading, with anything that would keep her mind occupied. But all she could think about was Adrian out there somewhere, doing violence in her name, potentially getting hurt or killed because her sister had been threatened. He came back at 4 a.m., clothes intact, but something tired in his eyes. No blood visible, no obvious injuries. He found her in the living room, unable to sleep, and sat down on the couch across from her. It's done, he said simply. What did you do? Sent a message. 3 of Dimitri's warehouses are no longer operational. His lieutenant is in the hospital with injuries that will take months to heal, and we left evidence that makes it very clear this was retaliation for the attempt on your sister. Elara's stomach turned. How many people were hurt? Does it matter? Yes. Adrian sighed. 17 injuries ranging from minor to severe. No deaths. That was intentional. I wanted them alive to tell Dimitri exactly what happened and why. This is going to escalate things. Possibly. Or it will make him reconsider whether you're worth the trouble. Adrian leaned back, exhaustion showing in the lines around his eyes. Either way, he knows now that touching your family means touching mine, and I protect what's mine. The possessiveness in his tone should have bothered her. A month ago, it would have. But sitting there at 4 a.m, knowing he'd just orchestrated an attack specifically to protect Maya, Elara found she couldn't summon the outrage. Thank you, she said quietly. Adrian looked surprised. For what? For protecting her. For making it clear she's off limits. Elara met his eyes. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did. She's your sister. That makes her important. He stood, stretched. Get some sleep, Elara. Tomorrow we'll see how Dimitri responds. Dimitri's response came 48 hours later, and it wasn't what anyone expected. Instead of retaliation, Dimitri sent flowers. They arrived at noon on a Thursday, an enormous arrangement of white lilies and black roses, the kind of thing you'd send to a funeral. The card was written in neat Cyrillic script that Victor had to translate. My apologies for the misunderstanding regarding your family. Perhaps we should discuss terms over dinner. Alara stared at the arrangement like it might explode. Is this a joke? No, Adrian said, reading the card for the third time. It's worse. It's strategy. I don't understand. Victor tossed the card onto the table. He's repositioning. The hits on his operations cost him money and credibility. He can't afford to look weak by backing down completely, but he also can't afford an extended war with Adrian's network. So he's offering a temporary ceasefire disguised as diplomacy. And the dinner invitation? A trap, Adrian said flatly, or a genuine attempt at negotiation. Hard to tell which. He looked at Alara. Either way, we're going. That's insane. That's politics. Adrian pulled out his phone, started typing. Dmitri extended the olive branch publicly. Those flowers were delivered in broad daylight, seen by half my building staff. If I refuse the meeting, I look afraid. If I accept and he tries something, he looks like a liar who can't be trusted. It's a calculated risk, but one I have to take. Then go alone. No. He specifically mentioned your family in the note. That means you. He wants to see us together, wants to assess how you've adapted, whether you're a liability or an asset. Adrian's expression was unreadable. And honestly, I want him to see what you've become in the last month. Let him reassess his assumptions. Alara's stomach twisted. When? Tomorrow night. Neutral location. Full security detail on both sides. Standard protocols for this kind of meeting. Adrian pocketed his phone. Katya will prep you this afternoon. What to wear, how to carry yourself, what to say, and what to absolutely avoid saying. This isn't like the last meeting. This is a direct negotiation where every word matters. What if I mess up? You won't. Adrian's tone was certain. You're smarter than you give yourself credit for, and you've learned enough in the last month to handle yourself. The afternoon session with Katya was intense in ways the weapons training hadn't been. This was about micro-expressions, about reading power dynamics, about understanding that in rooms like the one they'd be walking into tomorrow, violence wasn't always physical. Your posture matters, Katya said, adjusting Alara's shoulders. Too rigid and you look scared. Too relaxed and you look careless. You want controlled confidence, like you belong there, but you're aware of every exit. That's a lot to remember. Then make it instinct. Katya stepped back, assessed. Better. Now, eye contact. You meet Dmitri's gaze when he speaks to you directly, but you don't stare. Staring is a challenge. You're not there to challenge him. You're there to remind him that touching Adrian's family means consequences. They ran through scenarios for 2 hours. What to do if Dmitri got aggressive, how to deflect personal questions, when to speak, and when to stay silent, and let Adrian handle the conversation. By the end, Alara's head ached from the concentration required to remember everything. You'll do fine, Katya said, which was the closest she'd come to offering actual encouragement. Just remember, you're not a victim anymore. You're Adrian Volkov's wife. Act like it. That night, Alara couldn't sleep. She kept running through Katya's instructions, imagining all the ways tomorrow could go wrong. Around 2 a.m., she gave up and went to find Adrian. He was in his office, as usual, reviewing something on his laptop. He looked up when she appeared in the doorway. Can't sleep? Nervous about tomorrow. Good. Nerves keep you sharp. He closed the laptop. But if you're looking for reassurance, I don't have much to offer. This meeting is dangerous. Dmitri's unpredictable, and even neutral locations can become hostile in seconds. That's not reassuring at all. I know. Adrian stood, walked over to a cabinet, and pulled out 2 glasses and a bottle of something amber. He poured 2 fingers into each glass, handed her one. But here's what I can tell you. I've been doing this for 15 years. I've survived attempted coups, assassination attempts, betrayals from people I trusted, and I'm still here. Survival isn't the same as winning. In our world, survival is winning. He took a drink. Everything else is just details. Alara sipped the liquor, expensive, smooth, burning in a way that felt cleansing. What happens if Dmitri doesn't actually want peace? If this is just a setup? Then we fight our way out, and the war continues until one of us is dead. Adrian's tone was matter-of-fact. But I don't think that's his play. He's too smart for obvious violence. More likely, he'll try to negotiate terms that look reasonable on the surface, but actually benefit him long-term. And you'll counter with terms that look reasonable, but benefit you. Exactly. Adrian almost smiled. You're learning. They stood there in the quiet office, drinking expensive liquor at 2 in the morning, and for a moment it almost felt normal, like they were just two people having a conversation, not a forced couple navigating a world built on violence and strategy. "Can I ask you something?" Alara said. "You can ask." "I might not answer." "Fair." She turned her glass in her hands. "Why did you agree to this marriage? Really? It can't have just been about territory and shipping routes." Adrian was quiet for a long moment. "Your father approached me 6 months before the wedding, said he had a daughter who was smart, resourceful, and wasted in his organization. Said she deserved better than being married off to some associate who'd treat her like property." He took another drink. He asked if I'd be willing to take her on as a partner instead of a trophy wife. Said if I could keep you safe and give you room to become something more than what his world offered, he'd support the alliance completely. Alara's chest tightened. "He said that?" Word for word. Adrian met her eyes. "So I looked into you, read everything I could find, watched surveillance footage of you operating in your father's world, saw how you moved, how you thought, how you survived situations that should have broken you, and I thought, this is someone who could actually stand beside me. Not behind me, not helpless, but actually beside me." "And the running? After the wedding?" "Confirmed what I already knew. That you wouldn't just accept a cage, even a comfortable one. That you'd fight for your autonomy even when the odds were impossible." Adrian's expression softened slightly. "That's exactly the kind of person I wanted as a partner." "So you let me run. I let you see what running would cost you, what it would cost your sister, your safety, your chance at survival." He finished his drink. "And then I brought you back and gave you the tools to actually survive instead of just existing." Alara didn't know what to say to that. The idea that her father, who'd barely spoken to her in years except to issue orders, had actually advocated for her in some way felt surreal. The idea that Adrian had chosen her specifically because she'd fight him felt even stranger. "Thank you," she said finally, "for telling me. Don't thank me yet. Tomorrow's going to test everything you've learned. Let's see if my assessment was correct." The restaurant Dmitri chose was exactly the kind of place you'd expect for this kind of meeting. Upscale, private rooms available, staff who knew when to be invisible. Adrian's security team swept the location 3 hours before the scheduled meeting, checking for weapons, recording devices, anything that could turn the dinner into an ambush. Alara dressed carefully, choosing a dark green dress that Katya had selected, elegant without being flashy, professional without being cold. She let her hair down, minimal makeup, understated jewelry. The goal was to look like someone who belonged in Adrian's world, not someone trying too hard to fit in. Adrian wore a suit that probably cost more than a used car, looking every inch the powerful figure he was. Before they left, he handed her something small and metallic. "Panic button," he explained. "Clip it inside your dress. If things go wrong, press it. My men will be inside the room in under 10 seconds. Comforting. It's realistic." He adjusted his cuffs. "Ready?" She wasn't, but she nodded anyway. The drive to the restaurant was silent, tension thick in the car. Victor sat in the front passenger seat. 3 more of Adrian's men followed in a second vehicle. When they arrived, Dimitri's security was already visible. Dark suits, hard eyes, positioned at strategic points around the building. Inside, they were led to a private dining room that looked like something from a period film. Dark wood panels, crystal chandelier, a table set for 4. Dmitri was already seated, his own security standing behind him like statues. He stood when they entered, offering a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Adrian, Mrs. Volkov, thank you for accepting my invitation." "Dmitri." Adrian's tone was neutral. "Your flowers were unexpected. I thought a gesture of goodwill was appropriate, given recent misunderstandings." Dmitri gestured to the chairs. "Please, sit. I took the liberty of ordering wine." They sat. Dmitri's eyes settled on Alara, assessing. "You look well, Mrs. Volkov. Much more comfortable than when we last met." "I've had time to adjust," Alara said, keeping her voice level the way Katya had taught her. "So I see." Dmitri poured wine into her glass, then Adrian's, then his own. "I admit, I underestimated you. I thought you were simply leverage, a convenient weak point in an otherwise strong alliance. Your sister's near abduction was intended to remind your husband of that vulnerability." Adrian's hand tightened fractionally on his wine glass. Alara could feel the violence radiating off him, barely contained. But the response was educational, Dmitri continued, seemingly oblivious to how close he was to getting his throat cut. 17 of my men injured, 3 facilities damaged, my lieutenant still in recovery. All within 48 hours of the attempt on your sister. That's not the response of someone protecting a weakness. That's the response of someone protecting an asset. Is there a point to this reflection? Adrian's voice was cold. The point is that I miscalculated. Dmitri raised his glass. I assume Mrs. Volkov was a liability. I see now she's something else entirely. So I'm here to propose a recalibration of our relationship. What kind of recalibration? The contract on your wife is canceled, effective immediately. No more attempts, no more indirect pressure through family members. In exchange, I'd like to discuss redistribution of the Eastern Harbor routes. Not a full concession, but a percentage sharing that benefits both our operations. Adrian leaned back in his chair. You damaged 3 of my facilities and injured 17 of my people. You attempted to abduct my sister-in-law, and you think a simple percentage split makes that acceptable? I think a percentage split prevents a war that neither of us can afford. Dmitri's smile faded. You're strong, Adrian, but you're not invincible. I have allies you haven't factored in. This could escalate into something that destroys us both. Or we can be practical, accept our losses, and move forward with mutual benefit. Who are these allies? That's confidential. Dmitri took a drink. Let's just say my network extends further than you realize. Elara watched Adrian's face, saw the calculations happening behind his eyes. This was what Katya had warned about, offers that sounded reasonable, but hid traps underneath. I need specifics, Adrian said. What percentage? Which routes? What oversight? They spent the next hour negotiating details that made Elara's head spin. Percentages, schedules, monitoring protocols, dispute resolution procedures. It was business talk applied to criminal enterprises, surreal in its normalcy. She stayed quiet for most of it, playing her role as observant spouse. But there was a moment when Dmitri addressed her directly. Tell me, Mrs. Volkov, how do you feel about this arrangement? It was a trap. She could feel it. Any answer she gave could be used against Adrian, could make her look weak or aggressive or ignorant. She met Dmitri's eyes, kept her voice calm. I feel that my husband is capable of making decisions that protect our interests. My feelings are secondary to strategy. Something flickered in Dmitri's expression. Respect, maybe, or reassessment. A diplomatic answer. A truthful one. She didn't look away. I've learned that in this world, feelings are luxuries. Results matter. If this arrangement produces results that benefit everyone involved, then I support it. If it doesn't, then we'll deal with that when the time comes. Adrian's hand found hers under the table, squeezed once. Approval or warning, she wasn't sure. Dmitri laughed, short and sharp. You've trained her well, Adrian. She's nothing like the frightened girl at your wedding. She was never frightened, Adrian corrected, just calculating her options. Turns out she's very good at that. The dinner continued. Food arrived that Elara barely tasted. More wine was poured. The negotiations concluded with a tentative agreement. 60-40 split on the eastern routes, monthly oversight meetings, a 6-month trial period before permanent terms were set. They were preparing to leave when everything went to hell. The explosion came from the kitchen, loud enough to rattle the chandelier, followed immediately by gunfire. Adrian was moving before Elara could process, pulling her down beneath the table as his security flooded the room. Stay down, he ordered, drawing a weapon she hadn't known he was carrying. Dmitri's men were moving too, guns drawn, forming a defensive perimeter. For a surreal moment, both security teams were working together, focused on the external threat. Victor appeared in the doorway, blood streaming from a cut above his eye. Unknown hostiles, at least 8, heavily armed. They came through the kitchen and service entrance simultaneously. This wasn't us, Dmitri said, his own weapon drawn. I had nothing to do with this. I believe you. Adrian's voice was clipped, professional, which means someone's playing us both. More gunfire erupted in the hallway. Glass shattered. Someone was shouting in a language Elara didn't recognize. Adrian looked at Victor. Get her out. Back entrance, car 3. Do not stop for anything. I'm not leaving you. That wasn't a request. Adrian's eyes met hers, and for the first time since she'd met him, she saw something that might have been fear. Go. Now. Victor grabbed her arm, hauled her toward a service door she hadn't noticed before. Alara tried to look back to see what was happening, but Victor was already pushing her through into a narrow corridor that smelled like grease and old food. They ran. Behind them, the sounds of combat intensified. Gunfire, breaking furniture, shouting. Victor had his weapon drawn, checking corners with professional efficiency. They made it to a service exit that opened into an alley. Car 3 was there, engine running, back door open. Victor practically threw her inside. "Drive!" he barked at the driver. Then he was gone. Running back toward the restaurant, the car lurched forward. Alara twisted in her seat, watching the building recede. Smoke was visible now, dark against the evening sky. People were running. She could still hear gunfire. "We need to go back." "No, ma'am." The driver's voice was firm. "Orders are to get you to safety." Mr. Volkov was clear. "I don't care about orders. Someone's attacking." "Yes, ma'am, and our job is to make sure you survive it." The drive back to the penthouse took 20 minutes that felt like hours. Alara's mind spun with worst-case scenarios. Adrian shot, Victor down, Dimitri's so-called allies turning the restaurant into a massacre. When they finally arrived, she ran from the car before it fully stopped, took the elevator up to the penthouse, and found it filled with Adrian's remaining security team in defensive positions. Katya was there, phone pressed to her ear, coordinating something. She saw Alara and held up one finger. "Wait." Alara waited, every second scraping her nerves raw. Finally, Katya lowered the phone. "They're alive. Adrian, Victor, most of the primary team. Dimitri too. 3 casualties on our side, unknown number on theirs." "Who attacked?" "Still determining that. But it wasn't Dimitri's people. His men fought alongside ours to repel the assault." Katya's expression was grim. Someone wanted both leaders dead. This was an attempt to decapitate both organizations simultaneously. "The allies," Dimitri mentioned. "Most likely." Katya started typing something on her laptop. "Adrian's on his way back now. ETA 15 minutes. He's furious." That was an understatement. When Adrian finally walked through the door 40 minutes later, he looked like barely controlled rage wrapped in expensive fabric. His suit was torn, blood on his sleeve. Not his, based on how he was moving. Victor was beside him, the cut above his eye now bandaged. Adrian saw Alara and crossed the room in 3 strides, grabbed her face in both hands, checked her for injuries with intensity that made her breath catch. "You're okay," he said. Not a question. "I'm fine. Are you?" "Fine." He released her, turned to Katya. "Status. 5 attackers dead, 3 escaped. We've identified 2 of the bodies, hired contractors, Eastern European origin, no direct affiliation we can trace yet. The others are still being processed." Katya pulled up files on her screen. "But we found this on one of them." She turned the laptop so Adrian could see. Alara looked over his shoulder and saw a photograph, her, leaving the penthouse 3 days ago, completely unaware she was being surveilled. "They were planning a hit on Alara," Katya said quietly. "The attack on the restaurant was opportunistic. When they saw both you and Dimitri in the same location, they adjusted their plan. Kill both leaders, then take Alara for leverage or elimination." Adrian's jaw tightened until Alara thought she could hear his teeth grinding. "Find out who hired them. I want names, locations, everything, and I want it before sunrise." "Already working on it." Katya closed the laptop. "But Adrian, you need to consider the possibility." "What possibility?" "That this goes higher than Dimitri. That someone's trying to destabilize the entire region by taking out multiple organizations at once." Katya's expression was serious. This wasn't about territory or revenge. This was strategic. Victor nodded. "She's right. The timing, the coordination, the target selection. This is bigger than a local power play." Adrian was silent for a long moment. Then he looked at Alara. "Go to the bedroom. Lock the door. Don't open it for anyone except me or Victor." "What are you going to do?" "What I should have done weeks ago." His voice was cold, final. "End this before it ends us." Alara wanted to argue, wanted to demand to be included, wanted to do something other than hide in a bedroom while people tried to kill her, but the look in Adrian's eyes told her this wasn't the time. She went to the bedroom, locked the door, and waited. Hours passed. She could hear movement in the penthouse, People coming and going, urgent conversations in multiple languages, the occasional phone call that sounded tense even through the walls. Around 3 a.m., someone knocked on the door. "It's me," Adrian's voice said. She unlocked it. He looked exhausted, still in his torn, blood-stained suit, dark circles under his eyes. But he was alive, and that was enough to make her chest unclench slightly. "We found the source," he said without preamble. "Not Dmitri. Someone named Sergei Morozov runs operations in the North Territories. He's been building an alliance of smaller factions, trying to position himself as the next major power. Saw our wedding alliance as a threat to his expansion plans. So he tried to kill us both." "Yes. And he'll try again unless we stop him." Adrian sat down heavily on the edge of the bed. "Dmitri and I are coordinating a joint response. Tomorrow night, we hit Morozov's headquarters. This ends, one way or another. Let me help." "No." "Adrian, no." He looked at her, and the exhaustion in his eyes was mixed with something else. "You've learned to fight, to shoot, to survive. But you're not ready for a full assault, and I can't—" He stopped, seemed to struggle with the words. "I can't focus on the mission if I'm worried about keeping you alive in the middle of a firefight." It was the closest he'd come to admitting he cared about her as more than just an asset. "Then what do I do?" "You stay here, protected. And if something happens to me, Victor has instructions. He'll get you and your sister somewhere safe, set you up with new identities, enough money to disappear completely." Adrian's voice was steady. "You'll be free. That's the contingency." "I don't want contingencies. I want you to come back." He smiled, tired, sad. "I'll do my best." They sat there in silence, the weight of tomorrow hanging between them. Finally, Adrian stood. "Get some sleep. I have planning to do." He was at the door when Alara spoke again. "Adrian?" He turned. "Come back," she said simply. "That's an order from your partner." Something in his expression shifted, softened. "Yes, ma'am." He left. Alara lay down on the bed, still fully dressed, and stared at the ceiling until gray morning light started filtering through the curtains. She didn't sleep. She just waited for the war to start. The penthouse felt like a tomb the next morning. Adrian had left before dawn with Victor and most of his security team, leaving behind a skeleton crew and instructions that bordered on paranoid. Alara wasn't allowed near the windows, wasn't allowed to leave the floor, wasn't allowed to do anything except wait and wonder if her husband was going to come back in a body bag. Katya stayed with her, ostensibly for protection, but really for companionship. They sat in the living room, coffee going cold on the table between them, both pretending to read reports that neither was actually processing. "How long have you worked for Adrian?" Alara asked, just to break the oppressive silence. 8 years. Katya didn't look up from her tablet. "He pulled me out of a situation that would have ended badly, gave me training, purpose, a reason to survive." "What kind of situation?" "The kind where men think women are disposable." Katya's voice was flat. "He made sure the men who thought that learned otherwise, permanently." Alara absorbed that. "He does that a lot, doesn't he? Pulls people out of bad situations." "It's how he builds loyalty. Save someone's life, give them the tools to save themselves, and they'll follow you into hell." Katya finally looked at her. "Is that what he did with you?" "Sort of. He forced me into a situation I didn't want, then gave me the skills to survive it." Alara set down her untouched coffee. "I'm still not sure if that makes him a savior or a jailer." "Maybe both. People are complicated like that." They lapsed back into silence. Hours crawled by. Alara tried to distract herself with training routines, with reading, with anything that would keep her mind from imagining worst-case scenarios. But every sound made her jump. Every footstep in the hallway made her heart race. Around 3 p.m., Katya's phone buzzed. She read the message, her expression carefully neutral. "What?" Alara demanded. "They've engaged. Firefight at Morozov's compound." Katya typed something back. "No casualties on our side yet, but it's early." "How long does something like this usually take?" "Depends on resistance. Could be over in an hour, could take all night." Katya pocketed her phone. "Try not to think about it." Impossible advice. Alara spent the next 3 hours imagining every possible outcome, each one worse than the last. Adrian shot. Victor down. The entire operation falling apart because she wasn't there to what? She was trained enough to defend herself in close quarters, could shoot reasonably straight under controlled conditions. But she wasn't a soldier, wasn't ready for actual combat. Adrian had been right to leave her behind. That didn't make the waiting any easier. The sun was setting when Katya's phone rang. Not a text this time, an actual call. She answered immediately. Da. A pause. Her expression shifted, relief mixed with concern. Understood. We'll be ready. She hung up, looked at Alara. They're coming back. Adrian's injured but alive. Victor's bringing him in now. The world tilted. How injured? Gunshot to the shoulder, non-critical. He's conscious and giving orders, so he's fine. Katya was already moving toward the elevator. But we're bringing in a medical team to clean and close the wound. He refused to go to a hospital. Of course he did, Alara muttered, following her. 20 minutes later, the elevator opened and Victor emerged supporting Adrian, who looked like he'd gone 3 rounds with an industrial shredder. His shirt was soaked with blood, his own this time, based on the makeshift bandage around his left shoulder. His face was pale, but his eyes were alert, focused. He saw Alara and managed something that might have been a smile. Told you I'd come back. You're bleeding all over the floor. It's my floor. I'll bleed where I want. He let Victor guide him toward the couch. Get the medical kit, and someone find me a drink that's at least 40% alcohol. The next hour was controlled chaos. A doctor arrived, one of Adrian's people, clearly used to treating gunshot wounds without asking questions. He cleaned and stitched Adrian's shoulder while Adrian drank whiskey straight from the bottle and cursed in 3 different languages. Alara stood nearby, feeling useless and terrified in equal measure. When the doctor finally finished and left with instructions about infection signs and pain management, she sat down next to Adrian. What happened? We won. Adrian took another drink, winced. Morozov's dead. His compound is rubble. His entire network is fractured and leaderless. It's over. At what cost? 3 of my men dead, 7 injured. Dmitri lost 4. Adrian set the bottle down. Could have been worse. Was worse for Morozov. Victor appeared with updated reports. Cleanup crews are handling the scene. Police have been redirected. They'll find evidence of a gas leak and structural failure. Nothing that points back to us. Dmitri's people are sweeping their side of things. By tomorrow, this never happened. Good. Adrian leaned back carefully, favoring his injured shoulder. And the loose ends? Being tied up as we speak. Morozov's lieutenants are either dead or scattered. Anyone who might cause problems is being offered a choice: work for us or disappear permanently. Victor's expression was grim. The territory consolidation will take time, but the immediate threat is neutralized. Adrian nodded, then looked at Alara. It's done. You're safe. Your sister's safe. The contract's dead along with the man who issued it. She should have felt relief. Should have felt something other than the hollow exhaustion that settled into her bones. But all she could think about was the 3 men who died tonight, the families who'd get devastating news, the cascade of violence that had been necessary to buy her safety. Was it worth it? She asked quietly. Adrian was silent for a long moment. Ask me again in a month. When you're still breathing and no one's trying to kill you. Then we'll discuss worth. The recovery period was strange. Adrian was a terrible patient, restless, demanding, refusing to stay in bed despite doctor's orders. He ran his organization from the couch, laptop balanced on his knees, phone constantly ringing with updates and decisions that needed to be made. Alara found herself in the unexpected role of nurse, bringing him medication he didn't want to take, making sure he ate something other than whiskey and black coffee, changing his bandages with hands that shook the first few times but steadied with practice. You don't have to do this, Adrian said one afternoon as she cleaned the wound site. I have people who could handle medical care. I know, she applied fresh gauze carefully. But you're my husband. Apparently that means something now. He looked at her, something unreadable in his expression. Does it? I don't know yet. She taped the bandage in place. Ask me again in a month. A smile ghosted across his face, genuine this time, not the calculated ones he used in business. Fair enough. Maya came to visit 2 weeks after the attack, escorted by Irina and looking healthier than Alara had expected. She'd filled out slightly, lost some of the haunted look she'd had when they'd relocated her. She hugged Alara tight enough to hurt. I heard what happened, Maya said. Irina told me some of it. Are you okay? I'm fine. Adrian's the one who got shot, and he's recovering well, Adrian interjected from the couch, where he was absolutely not supposed to be working. Your sister's a surprisingly competent nurse. Maya looked between them, something shifting in her expression. You're different with each other, less tense. We've had a lot of practice, Alara said dryly. They spent the afternoon together, careful conversation that avoided the worst details, Maya talking about her remote classes and the books she'd been reading, Alara deflecting questions about the violence with practiced ease. When it was time for Maya to leave, she hugged Alara again. I don't hate you, Maya whispered. In case you were wondering, I was angry at first, but Irina helped me understand why you did what you did. You were protecting me. I get that now. Alara's throat tightened. I'm sorry it had to be this way. Me too. But we're alive. That's something. Maya pulled back, managed to smile. And hey, at least your husband's not completely terrible. He set up a scholarship fund in my name, did you know that? For kids from families like ours who want to study education. He did it without telling me, just had Irina mention it casually one day. Alara looked at Adrian, who suddenly seemed very interested in whatever was on his laptop screen. He's full of surprises, Alara said softly. After Maya left, Alara sat down next to Adrian on the couch. A scholarship fund? Tax deductible, he said without looking up. Good PR for the legitimate businesses. You're a terrible liar. I'm an excellent liar. I just choose when to use that skill. He closed the laptop. Your sister lost her normal life because of our marriage. Seemed fair to give something back. Make her name mean something positive instead of just being associated with violence. It was possibly the most decent thing Alara had heard in months. She leaned over, kissed his cheek. Brief, impulsive, surprising them both. Adrian blinked. What was that for? For being less terrible than you pretend to be. Don't spread that around. It'll ruin my reputation. The weeks turned into months. Adrian's shoulder healed with minimal complications. The territory consolidation that Victor had mentioned moved forward. Slowly, carefully, but forward. Dmitri honored the agreements from their interrupted dinner. The Eastern Harbor routes split according to the negotiated terms. An uneasy peace settled over the region, enforced by the memory of what had happened to the last person who'd challenged it. Alara continued training with Victor and Katya, but the urgency had shifted. It wasn't about immediate survival anymore. It was about long-term competence. She got better, stronger, more comfortable with the violence that lived at the edges of their world. She also got comfortable with Adrian in ways she hadn't expected. The forced proximity of his recovery had created a strange intimacy. Not romantic exactly, but something deeper than the strategic partnership they'd started with. They talked more, argued less, found rhythms that worked for both of them. One night, about 4 months after the attack on Morozov's compound, they were having dinner together, a routine that had become almost normal. Adrian set down his fork, looked at her with unusual seriousness. I need to show you something. That's ominous. It's not bad, just significant. He stood, gestured for her to follow. Come on. He led her to a part of the penthouse she rarely visited, a wing that he used for private meetings, secure communications, things she'd learned not to ask too many questions about. But instead of the office or conference room, he took her to a door she'd never seen opened. Inside was a workshop of some kind, computers, servers, equipment she didn't recognize. And on one wall, a massive display showing financial transactions, business registrations, organizational charts. What is this? Alara asked. The legitimate side of what I do. Adrian pulled up files, showed her business licenses, incorporation documents, tax filings, construction companies, import-export businesses, real estate holdings. All legal, all profitable, all completely clean. I don't understand. I've been building this for 5 years. Transitioning resources, legitimizing operations, creating a foundation that doesn't depend on criminal activity. He met her eyes. The violence, the territory battles, the constant threat, that's not sustainable long term. Eventually someone gets arrested or killed and the whole thing collapses. But businesses? Real businesses with real value? Those last. Alara studied the charts, seeing the scope of what he'd built. Why are you showing me this? Because I want you involved, not just as my wife, not just as someone I protect, as an actual partner in building something that matters. Adrian pulled up another file. I'm planning to establish a foundation, charitable work, community investment, education initiatives, things that use the money we've made from ugly sources to do something decent, and I want you to run it. Me? You. You're smart, you understand how to navigate complicated systems, and you actually give a damn about making things better. That's exactly who should be in charge of this. He gestured at the screens. I'm good at violence and strategy. You could be good at fixing what violence breaks. That's a partnership worth having. She stared at the organizational charts, at the foundation proposal with her name listed as director, at the vision of a future that wasn't just about survival, but about actually building something. I don't know the first thing about running a foundation. Neither did I when I started transitioning to legitimate businesses. You'll learn. You're good at that. Adrian's expression was open, vulnerable in a way she'd rarely seen. I'm asking you to choose this, Alara. Not because you're forced to, not because there are contracts or threats, because you want to build something meaningful with me. It was the choice she'd never had at the wedding. The freedom to say yes or no based on what she actually wanted, not what survival demanded. She thought about those last 4 months. The violence, yes, but also the training that had made her stronger. The relationship with Adrian that had evolved into something resembling genuine partnership. The way he'd protected Maya without being asked. The scholarship fund he'd created because it was the right thing to do. Okay, she said. Yes, I'll do it. Adrian's relief was visible. Yeah? Yeah, but I have conditions. Name them. Maya gets to be involved if she wants. Irina gets a position in security oversight, and Katya gets to train other women who need the skills to protect themselves. Alara crossed her arms. This foundation isn't just for show. It actually helps people. Or I walk. Agreed. Adrian extended his hand like they were sealing a business deal. Partners? She took his hand. Partners. They shook on it, and for the first time since the wedding, it felt like a choice she'd actually made. The foundation launched 6 months later, quiet at first, just small initiatives that tested their systems and processes. Scholarship programs for kids from troubled backgrounds, job training for people trying to leave criminal organizations, support services for families affected by violence. Alara threw herself into the work with intensity that surprised her. She interviewed candidates for positions, reviewed grant applications, visited community centers to understand what was actually needed versus what outsiders assumed would help. It was exhausting, frustrating, occasionally heartbreaking. It was also the most meaningful thing she'd ever done. Adrian watched her transformation with something that looked a lot like pride. He still ran his less legitimate operations, still handled the violence when it was necessary, but more and more of his time went toward the legal businesses, toward building the infrastructure that would outlast them both. They had dinner together most nights now, trading stories about their respective days. Adrian would complain about a real estate deal gone sideways. Alara would vent about bureaucratic obstacles to getting funding approved. They'd argue about strategy, about priorities, about the best way to handle complicated situations. And slowly, without either of them quite acknowledging it, the partnership became something more. It started with small things, Adrian's hand finding hers during a tense negotiation, Alara leaning against him while they watched late-night news, casual touches that lingered longer than strictly necessary. They still had separate bedrooms, still maintained certain boundaries, but the boundaries were eroding. One night, about a year after the wedding, Alara couldn't sleep. She wandered out to the living room and found Adrian standing by the windows like he had that night months ago, looking out at the city. She joined him without speaking. Can't sleep? He asked. Too much in my head. You? Same. He glanced at her. What's on your mind? The Foundation's board meeting tomorrow. I'm proposing we expand into housing assistance for families displaced by gang violence. It's going to be controversial. Why? Because some of those families are connected to people who've fought against us. Against you. She turned to face him. I'm asking you to fund programs that might help your enemies' families. Good, Adrian said simply. She blinked. Good? The whole point of what we're building is to break cycles, right? Violence begets violence, poverty begets crime, trauma begets more trauma. If we only help people we deem worthy, we're not actually changing anything. We're just perpetuating the same divisions. He looked at her. Fund the programs. Help everyone who needs it. That's how you actually make a difference. Alara studied his face in the reflected city lights. When did you become an idealist? I'm not. I'm a realist who's tired of watching the same patterns repeat. He smiled slightly. But you're making me believe things could actually be different. That's your influence. Is that a compliment? It's the truth. He reached out, tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, a gesture that would have felt possessive a year ago, but now just felt intimate. You've changed me, Alara. Made me think about legacy, about what I want the world to look like after I'm gone. That's not something I considered before. You've changed me too, made me stronger, gave me purpose. She leaned into his touch slightly. I still don't love you. I'm not sure I know how to love someone in this world. I know. His thumb brushed her cheekbone. But maybe we're building something better than love, something that actually lasts. She kissed him then, not impulsive like the cheek kiss months ago, but deliberate, choosing it, choosing him. He kissed back with careful intensity, one hand cupping her face, the other finding her waist. It was different from the clinical kiss at their wedding, from the strategic touches during public appearances. This was real, complicated, built on a year of survival and partnership and slowly earned trust. When they pulled apart, both breathing harder, Adrian rested his forehead against hers. Stay with me tonight, he said quietly, not because of obligation or strategy, because you want to. Okay, she whispered. Yeah, okay. They went to his bedroom together, the one she'd never actually entered despite living in the same space for a year. It was surprisingly simple, lacking the ostentation of the rest of the penthouse. Just a bed, some furniture, books on the nightstand. Human. What happened next was private, theirs alone. The kind of intimacy that didn't need to be narrated or examined. It was messy and uncertain and better than either of them expected, built on a foundation of actual partnership instead of forced obligation. Afterward, lying in the dark with Adrian's arm around her, Alara felt something settle in her chest that might have been peace. I'm staying, she said into the darkness. Not because I'm trapped, because I'm choosing this, choosing you, choosing what we're building together. Adrian's arm tightened around her. I know. Good. She closed her eyes. Just wanted to make sure you knew. They fell asleep like that, tangled together, complicated and imperfect and real. 2 years after the wedding, Alara stood on a stage in front of 200 people, announcing the foundation's expansion into 3 new cities. Maya sat in the front row, now finishing her teaching degree and working part-time with their education initiatives. Adrian stood off to the side, watching with an expression that might have been called soft on anyone else. The foundation had grown beyond anything Alara had imagined. Scholarships for hundreds of kids, job placement for people leaving criminal organizations, housing assistance for displaced families, counseling services for trauma survivors. They'd built something real, something that mattered. The violence hadn't disappeared completely. Adrian still handled threats when necessary, still maintained the infrastructure that kept them safe and solvent. But it was balanced now with the legitimate businesses, with the charitable work, with a future that didn't depend solely on who could execute better violence. After the presentation, during the reception, Dmitri approached them. Older now, grayer, but still sharp-eyed and dangerous. Impressive work, Mrs. Volkov, he said, raising his glass. Who would have thought the frightened bride from 2 years ago would become this? I was never frightened, Alara corrected, just calculating my options. Dmitri laughed. Indeed, Adrian, you chose well. I know, Adrian said, his hand finding Alara's. Later, when the reception was winding down and most guests had left, Alara and Adrian stood together looking out at the city from the venue's balcony. The same city that had looked so hostile and overwhelming 2 years ago now felt different. Still dangerous, still complicated, but navigable. Theirs. Do you ever regret it? Alara asked. The marriage, the alliance, bringing me into all of this? No. You? She thought about it honestly. Thought about the fear and anger of those first weeks, the violence and threats, the way her entire life had been upended without her consent. Then she thought about the foundation, about the people they'd helped, about the partnership she and Adrian had built from nothing but forced proximity and stubborn determination. No, she said. I don't regret it. I wouldn't choose it again if I could go back, but I don't regret where it led. That's honest. We're good at that now. Honesty. She leaned against him. Among other things. He smiled, kissed the top of her head. Yeah, we are. The city sprawled below them, full of people they'd helped and people they'd hurt, full of violence and hope, existing side by side like they always had. It wasn't perfect. Nothing about their life was perfect. But it was theirs. Built by choice, maintained by partnership, strengthened by the kind of love that didn't announce itself with poetry, but proved itself through action. Alara had run from this life once, thinking freedom meant escape. She'd learned the hard way that freedom was more complicated than that. Sometimes freedom meant choosing your cage. Sometimes it meant building something meaningful inside the constraints you couldn't change. She'd been a bride who refused to kneel. Now she was a woman who stood beside a dangerous man and made him better, who took blood money and turned it into scholarships and housing and hope, who'd learned that survival and meaning weren't mutually exclusive. The whispers in the city called her the queen beside the Mafia king, a woman no one dared touch. They weren't wrong, but they also weren't completely right. She was Alara Volkov, wife, partner, director of a foundation that mattered, a woman who'd been forced into an impossible situation and decided to make it possible anyway. And she wasn't running anymore. She was exactly where she chose to be.